The roofing industry is broken, and we've got the fix. At Hire a Pro, we help homeowners do the same thing a roofer would do when it hails on their own house. Own the project, delegate the tasks, and keep the compensation. But you don't have to take my word for it. You could ask Chrissy. Chrissy, how'd it go?
It went great. You educated us on how everything worked, showed us behind the curtain, so to speak, and after our $25,000 roof was replaced, we walked away with almost $6,000 for the work we put in.
And what work was that?
We got the permit and we picked the color. Hire a Pro handled everything else. You did a great job, and I'm not even being paid to say that. If anyone's listening and has a storm damage claim, call them. Don't hire a roofer, hire a pro.
That's awesome. I appreciate the kind words, and I think you just made up our new motto. All right, Joe, you're up.
So if insurance has approved your roof replacement, give these guys a call at 651-402-3400 or visit them online at hirea.pro. That's hire, and then put the dot there, pro.
Looking for a podcast where sports betting meets reckless optimism, questionable logic, and maybe even occasionally a stroke of genius?
It's the Spread Zone Podcast with Rizzuto, Tim McKernan, and Anthony Stalter. 3 opinions, 0 guarantees. Endless entertainment. Whether you're betting big or just betting lunch, get in the Spread Zone. Find it now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
The show today is dedicated to squirrels. Squirrels in cities all over America. And my name is MISCHKE. You know how long squirrels have been in America? 40 million years. 40 million years squirrels have lived in America. We have not been here 40 million years. That's right, squirrels got here first, folks. This is their country. You people like squirrels? As much as some of you probably like to beat up on them, don't care for them, don't want them around, find them annoying, they were here first. 40 million years squirrels have been here. I read that today. I thought, 40 million years? They must sing a very different song than Woody Guthrie sang, huh? They sing, "This land ain't yours, this land is ours, but you run us over with your cars, or trucks or motorcycles, or your city bus. This land was not made for you, it's for us. You freaking cracker, Woody Guthrie. There's nothing noble about your song. You think it's your land? Well, we just can't stand hearing you claim that when you're wrong. This land ain't yours. This land is ours. But you run us over with your cars or your trucks and motorcycles or your city bus. This land was not made for you, it was made for us. Can't you just see a squirrel right now out there, proud, singing, "Nobody living can ever stop me as I go walking freedom's highway. Nobody living will ever make me turn back. This land is mine, I'm a squirrel. 40 million years, I've made my case. How long were you here, Woody, with your human race? 40 million years. I have called this my home. This land ain't yours, it's freaking mine. I am a squirrel." Anyway, so I'm dedicating the show today to the squirrels who have survived close calls out on the road. And I could just go with dedicating it to the many squirrels who I have personally witnessed survive running across the street in front of me. The squirrels who have veered left, then right, then left again, then right, then left, just missing my car tires. The ones that have run under my car as I drove by, cheating death by fractions of seconds. The squirrels that have just missed being hit by my car, and then also the car coming the other way, then the car right behind me, all the while the squirrel dodging back and forth, serpentine movements that take them to the brink of their demise, and yet somehow they have made it across the street, made it to the other boulevard, feeling more alive than they've ever felt in their existence, facing down the grim reaper, living to tell the tale later that night to their little ones, up in their tree nest, saying, "Nobody living can ever stop me as I go walking freedom's highway." Dad, did you have a close call again today? Is that why you're singing? That's right. Dad almost bought the farm again today, kids. Tell us about it, Dad. How close a call was it? Well, we'll wait till your mother falls asleep, and then I'll tell you all about it. Why do you keep crossing the street, Dad? The same reason the chicken does, kids, to get to the other side. Anyway, hang tight and I'll tell you all about my exploits today. My shadow has tire tread all over it. That's how close it was. Mom doesn't like these stories, does she, Daddy? No, she does not. But then she should not have married the Evel Knievel of Squirrel Country, should she have, huh? I live on the edge, kids. That's where life is felt most intensely. That's where I know I have truly lived, not just existed. You'll never see your old pa just existing, kids. No, I don't exist. I exult. I exult. Will you let us cross the street, Daddy? No, you can't do it. You don't know the ropes like I do. There's a science to it, and an art. Oh, yeah, and I have 'em both down. Didn't your friend Ted die last week crossing the street? Yeah, but Ted was a dolt. He had the intelligence of a discarded bottle cap. He thought he could leap that car coming down the street. You can't leap cars. When I told him he had to be like Evel Knievel, I meant daring. I didn't mean he could jump the cars. You can't jump the cars. His tail can still be seen sticking out of that guy's grill. Ted's wife wants me to pay her a visit. What am I supposed to say to her? That her husband was a vacuous twit? Daddy, maybe you could get Ted's tail back from that car grill, and you could give it to his wife. She could use it as a pillow to comfort herself. That is absolutely sick, kids. What the hell's wrong with you? You even know what you're saying? You want to fall asleep someday on Daddy's lap after I'm dead, huh? Would you like my corpse to comfort you when I'm gone? That's what you're asking here. What's wrong with you? Anyway, today's show dedicated to all the squirrels I've missed before. Driving in my 4x4. I'm glad they came along. I dedicate this song to all the squirrels I've missed before. Headline from today's news: ex-Wisconsin players say in lawsuit that former coach psychologically abused them. I saw this headline today and it got me thinking. Athletes being psychologically abused by a coach. I feel that is what athletic coaches have done since the dawn of time. They can be sued for this? Psychologically abusing players is what coaches do. I think it's what they see as their unofficial job description. What is coaching? You ever watched coaches? If you could sue every coach who's been psychologically abusive, wouldn't you be suing all of them? One of the reasons I didn't play organized school sports when I was a kid, but instead preferred playing sports in my neighborhood with my pals, was that when us kids psychologically abused one another, it was kind of funny. Coaches never made me laugh. They all seemed to have gone to the Heinrich Himmler school of psychological encouragement. I was a bigger fan of the Don Rickles school. By the way, can you imagine if Nazis would have been more like Don Rickles and less like Heinrich Himmler? Actually, this is a bit of a tangent, but were there any Nazi motivational speakers historically? I'm just wondering if the job of motivational speaker or life coach ever coincided with someone also being a Nazi. If you placed an ad as a life coach, say, and you mentioned your fees were less than half that of what everyone else was charging for the same services, could you mention you're a Nazi and still get some work? Yes, I'm a Nazi, and that's often a strike against me, but I'm also less than half what you'd pay for any other life coach. If you can take the good I have to offer and just let the rest go in one ear and out the other, you can really save a lot of money here. Think about it. Let me just look up Nazi motivational speaker here and see what comes up. I'm just curious if there is one out there. Nazi motivational speaker. Hitler's name comes up. Of course. Why didn't I think of that? He was a Nazi motivational speaker. Okay, there was the one. There are no others, however. As I look here, his is the only name that comes up. It must be a tough gig. Nazi motivational speaker. Nazi life coach. But if it was half price, would someone be tempted if they were short on cash and they really needed that life coach? Maybe if there was a catchy jingle to go with it. What you see is what you get. This Nazi is not a threat. I just want to motivate. I'm not looking to exterminate. A boom a chuck a boom a boom boom ba tick a choom bottle up a took a jump a bum a tick a doom bang a doom dang a doop a doop bum a doo da doo lip up a ting a dope a bum a da bum. You'll get more excited about your life while learning all about the Third Reich. I'm all for eliminating the weaker. I'm a Nazi motivational speaker. Give your life a bit more pep. Put a spring in your goose step. And if you don't think I'm very nice, just remember that I was half price. Back after this break. Hey, you, yeah, you, no, not you, you. The one who just tripped on air, got hit by a falling marshmallow, and somehow ended up in a situation that makes no sense at all. What? I don't know. I'm just making this stuff up. Bradshaw and Bryant. Decades of experience packed into brains that actually understand how your life can explode in the weirdest way. They've watched it all, seen it all. They'll talk to you for free. Whatever you need, talk to them about it. They'll listen to you. They'll hear you out. And if they take your case, they won't take a dime unless they win your case. Bradshaw and Bryant, legally awesome. They don't just handle accidents. They dominate them.
Let me put it this way for you people. Seeking justice for the inside. La 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 la.
Bradshaw and Bryant. Chicka chicka tick tick tick. Learn more at minnesotapersonalinjury.com. Chicka chicka tick tick tick. When I talk to folks at MSP, as in Minneapolis-St. Paul Plumbing, Heating, and Air, they often talk to me about a house they go into. Say a house with plumbing issues, okay? The homeowner hears what's involved in fixing these plumbing issues. Well, he says, gee, I could just do it myself, couldn't I? I mean, what's really involved? And very patiently, the folks at MSP pass along all that he needs to know, all he needs to purchase, the tools he'll need to employ, the time it'll probably take, the potential pitfalls if things don't go right. They're very patient at MSP. After MSP patiently describes all that's involved in detail, the homeowner often looks around the room and says, yeah, who the heck am I kidding? That's a ridiculous amount of work and effort, and all for something that may go wrong anyway if I don't do everything right, and how skilled am I really? Yes, go ahead, do it. Please do it. At MSP, they're never going to try to talk you into having them do the job. You decide. You want the best plumbers the Twin Cities have to offer and no headaches? Or do you want to play hero? See how it goes. Your call. MSP, the best the Twin Cities has to offer.
Bold action from the White House on immigration this week as a new executive order is aiming to deter migrants by stationing hundreds of socially awkward men at the southern border. Immigration officials hope the men's generally off-putting demeanor and strained attempts at conversation could curb illegal border crossings by at least 30%.
That's right. The new policy went into effect just days ago, with socially awkward men deployed at border checkpoints across Arizona and Texas. We've already heard reports of migrants, sometimes entire families, changing their minds when they get to the border and turning around immediately.
You're watching the Onion News Network.
I am holding a wonderful book called Funny Because It's True: How the Onion Created Modern American News Satire. Christine Wentz is the author, and I'm a little surprised this book hasn't been written before now, given the legendary status of the Onion and given what an incredible story the story of the Onion is. But I want to start out, Christine, by saying, what would you say to someone if they asked you to give them a description of the Onion, of what the Onion is? When they say, what is this thing you wrote about? What is this Onion? How do you sum it up?
The Onion presents itself as a news source. Everything is delivered completely straight, but it is all satire. The point of the Onion is to point out absurdities in both everyday life, as well as what's happening in the news, the way the news operates, even the sort of format and shape and look and feel and sound of the news. And because the news media in our society kind of defines what reality is, the Onion sort of provides this public service with their satire, in that they are known for being able to sort of cut through a lot of the noise and fluff, I guess, that we see in the media and sort of get at essential truths about certain things. But basically, The Onion is a satiric news source that's been around. It was founded in 1988, has recently gone back into print with new ownership, and became like a really foundational part of comedy in the U.S. and actually globally as well, as I found when I wrote the book.
That's a sophisticated take, but you tell me if I'm going overboard here. In 1988, a motley crew of slackers in Madison decided to goof around with their own news publication.
Yes, that too. A bunch of 20-year-olds got together and decided to make a newspaper in which everything in it was invented.
There's a lovely moment, and by moment I mean a moment in history in the 80s in Madison. First of all, it's delightful that it happened in Madison, Wisconsin. The University of Wisconsin-Madison, when you went there, and for folks who, well, I haven't mentioned this yet, you worked at the Onion, you were there at the beginning, which is wonderful. And so you have that inside vantage point. But the University of Wisconsin-Madison at that time was almost entirely Wisconsin kids.
It was, yes.
And you're a Wisconsin kid.
I am. Although I was actually born on an Army base in El Paso, Texas, and then lived for a few years in Alaska as a toddler. I grew up in rural Wisconsin, rural Spring Green, Wisconsin, which is about 40 miles from Madison. And yes, everybody on the original Onion staff in the next couple of years, including the people that made it famous a few years after me, were all Wisconsin kids.
And what does that mean to you in terms of what the Onion was in the late 80s, what it was when it started, what was happening with this publication? Was there something about a bunch of Wisconsin guys doing this that was different than if it was happening in New York City, LA?
The big difference is about doing this kind of thing in Madison is that there's actually a ton of freedom, because you don't have to worry about, some fancy director or agent or whatever, like coming to your show or like picking up your poetry, or you can do whatever you want. So I think that there's a kind of creativity and eccentricity maybe that can develop and flower in the Midwest in a way that it maybe doesn't when you're in an environment where you're sort of aware of the entertainment industry, like kind of being around you, or the publishing industry, or whatever it is. So there's that. There's also at that time, this is like I think there's a stereotypical, a little bit Gen X aspect to it at that time. We were called slackers, all of that kind of stuff that we've heard about. But there was a weird, there was a feeling that like no one cares about us, so we can do whatever we want kind of thing. And the fact that we were all, at a big, extremely good public university, we were learning a lot of great stuff, especially in the liberal arts. The Onion was filled with literature majors, creative writing majors, history majors, and we were all using that kind of stuff in our work. So I don't know. I think there's a combination of a lot of creative freedom to kind of, be just really stretch and develop your thing when you're young, which is a really great thing to be able to do.
This is from your book, Funny Because It's True. At the time, UW-Madison had a much more relaxed admissions policy than it does today. As long as you were in the top half of your high school graduating class, you were in. Madison was also cheap. A land-grant university, it was still being generously funded by government then, and in the late 80s, tuition was only $800 a semester. No, I did not leave off a zero. Tim Keck, one of the guys who started The Onion, worked at a gas station in high school and saved enough money to cover his costs at the U of W for 2 years. For Keck, arriving in Madison was like discovering a secret little door in your bedroom. You open it up and you go into another dimension. I don't know how much even people around here really know about Madison in general, capital of Wisconsin, and Madison specifically in the 80s, but can you say more about Madison? Because that plays a big role in your book.
I mean, for me, growing up in rural Wisconsin, even though it was only 40 miles away, Madison, it was just another planet from where I grew up. And I went to a high school where, maybe 20% of the people went to college, and most of that was community college, so it was like this amazing thing I'd been waiting for, since I was 12. There was really great music and literary and other scenes happening. The music scene was amazing there. That's when Smart Studios was getting going. They later would produce Nirvana and Smashing Pumpkins and stuff like that. Artists were doing all kinds of weird and crazy stuff. People are young and excited and taking it really seriously. And people are just having this explosion of creativity that happens at that age. Madison was cheap. You could have a part-time job or 2 part-time jobs like I had and still have time for projects and a social life and just really do a lot of hanging out and making stuff, and it's just a lot more difficult for people to do that these days.
I can't imagine today someone having the time or the money to put out a newspaper and go to school. The thing that becomes evident very quickly in your book is how much work it was to put this out. This was a weekly?
Yeah, it was a weekly, yeah.
I grew up in a newspaper family. My father put out a newspaper every 2 weeks. The newspaper still exists today, and it's still in my family. My brothers run it. But my pop got it in 1970. And I know what went into it. I know what goes into it. And you guys treated this like a real newspaper in every way except it was full of BS.
Yeah, exactly.
But it was a newspaper, and someone had to go sell ads. Mm-hmm. This thing was going to be free. It was important for college kids that this thing be free so that broke college kids could read it. And that meant someone had to sell ads. Just that the Onion found college kids willing to sell ads astounds me. I never understand someone raising their hand saying, yeah, I'll sell ads.
Yeah. And believe me, I used to have a very kind of snobby sort of artist attitude, toward the advertising business side. But when in the process of writing the book, I gained a tremendous amount of respect, actually, because I was just it wouldn't exist without those guys, those people are necessary. In that particularly they were doing, it was, you had to pay the printer and you had to, pay for other stuff.
Man,
the ad people were important. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell you. It is drummed into my brain from 6 years old on. I could not go to a business that didn't advertise in my dad's paper. I had it in my head from an early age that what I'm eating because of advertising. What I'm wearing because of advertising. My dad's newspaper was free. And there were 8 kids at home, and we all were raised off this little newspaper that came out every 2 weeks. The ads were what got us through life. And now, here I am. This podcast is free. When I was in radio for over 20 years, it was free. But you have to listen to ads or put up with ads. That's the agreement. That's the arrangement. I find it an absolutely wonderful agreement. I find it one of the greatest agreements in the history of America. Getting things to people free and doing this little trade-off. I don't want to subscribe to podcasts. I like getting my stuff free, and I'm okay with ads, particularly if the guy makes the ad somewhat interesting and not the most boring thing I've ever heard. So I'm all on board on advertising. It's just drummed into me. But what I marvel at is someone agreeing to sell ads. Did they get money for selling ads?
They worked on commission, I think, most of the time. That's how that worked. Because honestly, I think probably the ad salespeople were the only people that made money. The people writing the content got paid nothing.
Yes.
So.
When I'd go to my dad's newspaper office, the editors and the writers were all broke. They were all broke. You'd go visit them at their houses. They had nothing. You know, they were eating ramen noodles. You go to the advertising sales guys' houses in the suburbs, they'd have a swimming pool. But I would never have traded places with them. You know, I wanted to be on the writing end. As far as who these people were who started it, tell me about the original crew.
The Onion was started by my roommate, Tim Keck, who is the son of a newspaper family. Also, he lived in Hammond, Indiana as a kid. His dad was an editor at the Hammond Times. His mom was a pioneering environmental reporter there, a total badass, as far as I can tell. She seems pretty spectacular. So he grew up in an absolutely newspaper-soaked environment. When he needed to make money after his gas station money ran out, he was like, well, maybe I'll start a newspaper. And at that time, there was an incredibly vital media environment in Madison. There were these free newspapers all over the place, like covering every possible topic. So he's like 20 when he's doing this. He got his friend, a guy named Chris Johnson, to help him out. They, sold some ads and figured out where to get the thing printed. And then they were like, oh, but what do we put in the newspaper? A lot of publications are started because the editors have like a mission or like there's something that people want to express or an audience you want to reach. The Onion was started as a business so that Tim could pay his rent, right? He asked me to be the art director. I didn't know what that was, but I had a friend, a guy named Matt Cook, who was also an improv comedian in Madison and a philosophy major. And he said in a meeting with them, hey, why don't we just make it all up? So that's what they did. I don't know how, if it was like, 4 days before the printer deadline, before that decision was made. There was a lot of that kind of stuff happening at the time. They were just winging it. I ended up being the copy editor, but I also did a little writing and I did silly illustrations and stuff like that. There were a lot of cartoons in the early Onion. We knew people like James Sturm, who is now a very well-known graphics artist, and he runs the Center for Cartoon Studies in Vermont. He was drawing cartoons. A guy named Scott Dickers, who did Jim's Journal, which people of a certain age probably will remember, maybe from their college newspapers. He did a bunch of cartoons, and we just were getting people to just write whatever. So there's this very sort of surreal, everybody could just write whatever they wanted. There was just absolute total creative freedom.
There were times over the years where you couldn't go to a party without someone in some corner talking to somebody, passing along headlines he or she had read in The Onion. Is there a trajectory where The Onion reaches the top of some mountain, its absolute peak of popularity, and then faces the beginning of some kind of descent? I know once again this is a really hopeful period for it. It's in independent hands again. It's going to print again. There's a lot of wonderful things happening. But what was the peak for this publication?
From my generation, it's probably the mid-late 90s when they're the absolute classic crew. That's when a lot of absolutely essential classic Onion stuff came out. The Onion's editorial office moved to New York in 2001, a few months before 9/11. So they wrote their iconic and extremely well-received 9/11 issue 2 weeks after the attacks. And then in the early 2000s, there was the sort of new crew of like millennial staff came in, and they did some very innovative and fun stuff with social media, which was just beginning then, and kind of online playing and like kind of just working with the new medium then. But like every other, publication, when the internet came along, the Onion had to figure out what to do. Same with the New York Times and everything else. And the Onion has sort of followed the same trajectory as the news and media that it's satirized. So in many ways, the Onion's sort of peak years are actually kind of similar to the peak years of other forms of media.
Yeah.
In a desperate attempt to fill 24 hours of programming, here's some bullshit that happened somewhere today. We've got some footage here of the bullshit, which began just after 3 o'clock this afternoon, when residents in this neighborhood were shocked to see this fairly common thing happening.
I went to my window and I was like, whoa, there's some bullshit happening.
That happened right over there.
Our reporter Keith Collins joins us now live from the scene of the bullshit through the use of expensive technology.
People say I get a little too passionate about American pressure when I do their ads. Oh, a little too passionate, huh? You people who use pressure washers on the job out there? The competitors of American Pressure sell machines. American Pressure sells confidence. Confidence. American Pressure sells reliability. American Pressure sells expertise, experience. You know what your pressure washer really is out there, you people who use them in your business? Well, I'll tell you, if it's from American Pressure, it's a promise. It's the promise that your equipment is going to work, that your staff won't be wasting time on a broken machine, that your business won't get bogged down with a subpar pressure washer and the dominoes that fall because of it. It's the promise that your company will be operating at full capacity. But who are you trusting that to, huh? Some catalog? A website? Did you find a neat website? Oh, goody for you. Your pressure washer should be a promise, not a little machine. At American Pressure, they keep their promises. You copy? Imagine a residential memory care center where every corner whispers home. Imagine a salon there where laughter floats above the scent of fresh shampoo, a barber's chair where stories are cut in as carefully as hair, a cinema where yesterday's memories feel like today's movie. Step outside into the courtyard. The breeze greets you, the sun, the people, the loving people who work at the Wellshire of Medina and Bloomington, there with your loved one, serving ice cream in the ice cream parlor, enjoying the smell of flowers, the laughter of other residents. At the Wellshire Memory Care Center, life is reimagined. 4 different quadrants, each a world of comfort, each one designed for the different stages of memory care. Staff who know your name, who know your smile, who know your song. Staff who stay, who don't leave. There isn't turnover at the Wellshire, because love isn't a catchphrase. It's the language spoken at the Wellshire of Bloomington and Medina. There must have been just glorious days at the Onion, having fun, knocking around different things that could possibly go in the next publication. The Onion obviously was known for these entertaining headlines. Perky Canada has own government. CIA realizes it's been using black highlighters all these years. Cool dad raising daughter on media that will put her entirely out of touch with her generation. You have said 90% of what was pitched was never used.
Yeah. So the Onion developed a really kind of incredible editorial process through all of this. A lot of that was started by editor named Rich Dahm, who would later go on to help produce the Colbert Report and do all kinds of other very interesting things. Also an old, one of my oldest friends as well. But the Onion writer pitch meetings, which Rich got going in like 1990, that's where the writers bring in a bunch of headlines. And yeah, it's like maybe 1 or 2 out of 100 that get accepted. And as far as I can tell, talking to the current editors today, I mean, that's basically the same. It's been the same ratio like this entire time. They really have a system down in which they pick the best stuff. That's part of the reason why they're still here after almost 40 years. So
I would have liked to have been the guy who was sitting around the Onion office pitching the headline, "Winner didn't even know it was pie eating contest." Does everybody jump up and say, okay, well, we don't even have to discuss that one?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. You know, I wanted to get in on like a new writer's room meeting in the process of writing the book. And weirdly, like I never got around to it. I was just trying to finish the book. As I understand it, the headlines are read very, very straight. I mean, the whole point is to not, I mean, it's really important for the Onion's delivery that because it's all always presented very straight, but there's never any, okay, you guys, I got a great one now, blah, you know, like They have actually enforced techniques, I think, in their history when they're in the writer's room so that everyone just says it. It's just like you're reading the label of a soup can or something. There's no performance of it in those meetings.
So I'm picturing now someone just quietly sitting there and taking his or her turn and saying, okay, here's what I have. Depression hits losers hardest.
Yes.
It's very different when you just say it that way. And then people have to think, okay, what would it be like to read that headline or the headline, Area Man Consults Internet Whenever Possible.
That's from like 2000, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Let's go back to 2001. Why was there a move to New York from Madison?
The Onion was trying to sell itself. Even though the Onion made a profit and had an archive and was like basically a real thing, it's the Onion, but it was a real thing, they could not sell themselves. Finally, Comedy Central almost bought the Onion. Comedy Central was just getting going at that time. But unfortunately, literally when they were in the process of finalizing the deal, which is a multi-million-dollar deal, the dot-com bubble burst and Comedy Central is like, they didn't have the money or the mojo anymore to do that. And that deal fell through. So the whole editorial staff was getting all ginned up to move to New York City. And then at the last minute, they didn't move to New York City. So they said, you know what, we're just going to go to New York anyway, because we want to go be with our comedy peers. We want to hang out with people at Upright Citizens Brigade. We want to get out of Madison. We are so sick of being in Madison. We don't want to be in this college town anymore. At that point, the Onion had a couple little branch offices in Milwaukee and Chicago. And maybe, I don't know if they were in Minneapolis yet by then, they might have been. But they moved. And about a few months later, 9/11 happened.
And 9/11 happens and you're the Onion.
Yep.
The one thing I remember most from that week, and it probably was because I was doing nighttime radio and I goofed around a lot, and we were done goofing around, we were told. That's it for goofing around, no more goofing around. It's like telling a guy who bakes bread, no more bread.
Yeah.
And I would look to people who were in the field of goofing around to see if they were goofing around, and they weren't. And you'd turn on the nighttime talk shows, late night comedy shows, and they were not goofing around. And it was the end of goofing around for everybody. And I don't know, we didn't have any sense of when the goofing around could start again or if it could start again. A lot of people credit the Onion for kickstarting goofing around again.
Mm-hmm.
They're in New York, and it's very different when you're in New York. All my years of goofing around, I was well aware you had to make sure of a couple things when you goofed around. If it got to something sensitive, say something really bad happened in London, I was a little safer than if it happened in the city I was in. Number two was time. Enough time passes and you can make a Kennedy assassination joke. Probably not that funny in December of 1963.
Mm-hmm.
Not too long after the attacks, the Onion realizes we're making bread. We make bread. We have to make our bread.
Mm-hmm.
And they find a way.
Yeah.
I don't have in front of me those first headlines. Do you have them or remember them?
I do. I should open the book to that page. But the Onion's satire at that point had become very, very sharp. They just moved to New York and they were super excited to be there. And I was actually myself living in New York at that time. So I remember very well what it was like after the attacks. But anyway, I'll just read you some headlines. The couple of main ones are U.S. vows to defeat whoever it is we're at war with. American life turns into bad Jerry Bruckheimer movie. Hijackers surprised to find themselves in hell. Another one, not knowing what else to do, woman bakes American flag cake.
Now, the book is titled Funny Because It's True. And that headline you just read there, I feel like that actually happened.
That is actually based on a thing that writer Carol Kolb actually experienced. And so it ended up in the front page that week, yeah.
You know what hobby exploded more than any other following 9/11? What hobby in America took off more than any other? To this day, I think about it every now and then, and it's just so weird to me. Knitting.
I think it's a very meditative prep practice, probably. A lot of needlework is like that. You're sitting very quiet, you're doing something creative, and you have to pay attention to what you're doing, but it's also very comforting, because what are you knitting? You're knitting scarves and sweaters and like snuggly things. So
yeah, there's that. And then I also have a feeling everyone knitting is pretending it's 1840, and we're nowhere near a time when planes can go into buildings.
Yeah.
So those headlines you read, there's a sophistication to that. And anybody in the business of getting ready to be funny again back then had to be sophisticated. You had to realize that people wanted to laugh, needed to laugh, but they were worried about laughing, and they wanted to make sure it was a safe thing to laugh at.
Mm-hmm.
And those were what you delivered there. Those were, and to understand why they were was critical. You could do something else a year later. But
yeah, I think that they were processing their own feelings during that time. Humor is a way of dealing with really difficult things. And they were pretty emotionally intense stuff that they wanted to express when they were doing that. And it turned out that it resonated with people just like incredibly.
I mentioned the title of the book, Funny Because It's True. Explain for people that title.
We went through a million titles trying to figure out what to call this book. And then I suddenly hit on this and I was like, okay, that just encapsulates exactly what The Onion does at its best. True because it's funny. It's funny because it's true at its best. And the thing is, because I know, some of these Onion writers have been people I've known for decades at this point. And there's actually a lot of sincerity about The Onion, and they really want to point out, what they see, as flaws in the discourse and flaws in the, human nature and things like that. And there is a kind of Onion headline that's just basically just stating the facts. The 9/11 issue that I appreciate was Jerry Falwell. Is that guy a dick or what? and that was a response to Jerry Falwell, like making extremely cruel remarks, saying that, the gays brought this attack on America. God. It's just like, wow, really? Like, that's what you chose to say right now. Okay.
You mentioned your old roommate, one of the founders of The Onion. He had a thing he said, and see if I got this right, I'll probably butcher this. We're going to make big things small and small things big.
Yeah, that's also another kind of key, like, Onion, like, sort of writing technique.
And they stay so true to that. So tell people what that means.
For me personally, and again, like, I'm coming at it like I know these people and I grew up in this environment and I'm from Wisconsin. I'm a Midwesterner who's lived on the coasts, that kind of thing. The Onion, to me, at its best, often points out stuff that the big people just miss entirely. It's about everyday people who aren't the people who are making the decisions, the experiences of everyday people. Rubber band needed. You make that into the headline and it becomes funny, because it's true, but also because you haven't thought about it that way before too.
On the front page of a paper at the top, that's for the biggest thing going on, the biggest thing. And when you highlight something ridiculously small as the biggest thing going on, that's funny. I remember as a little kid watching this stupid sitcom when I was homesick from school, Petticoat Junction, and the little town of Pixley had a newspaper headline that says, Pixley gumball machine runs out. And I laughed at that because of how silly it was to have that as the lead headline, but that was the biggest thing going there. Or The Onion would have some incredibly horrific thing turned into something almost in passing, mentioning it in passing. Right there, you have a little recipe for comedy. There's more you have to do with it, but it's a good foundation. I like working with something like that. I was looking at the issue. Was this? This was really early on. The photo on the front page was the cheese sandwich winner. The Onion announced that a cheese sandwich would be awarded to the author of the best Why I Think America is Neat essay. Then there was the winner. And the winner for Why I Think America is Neat for that essay contest, the winner wrote, America is really neat. We have a solid naval fleet. The food is good. The sky is blue. The water's wet. The beer is too. Our Constitution sets it straight. I'm free to speak. I'm free to date. I like it here, and so should you. Shooby dooby dooby doo.
That was actually a real contest.
That's real? You mean
Yes, it's
that
real.
was
No,
sent
that's real.
in?
Like, if you look up the first year, there was a lot of goofing around with that. There's some stuff that's real and there's some stuff that is not real. There's a lot of like strange messing around with that kind of stuff in the first year. Yeah. Shockingly enough, the most ridiculous stuff and there was a lot of completely ridiculous things we would put in the newspaper that first year, and people believed it because it was in print.
Even in the 21st century, there was a headline that a lot of conservative Republicans believed and passed along.
Planned Parenthood opens $8 billion abortion plex.
That's it. That's the one. Again, if you were at all aware of The Onion, that's so odd to me. But,
in some ways, it's not really that funny, like how easy it is to fool people with something that looks and smells like news. This is like actually created some pretty intense problems that we have.
I want to ask you about that now that you bring it up. So tell me the difference between what we now call fake news and the fake news of The Onion.
Yeah, so The Onion, does news satire. So that's like fake news that's supposed to be trying to make the world a better place, right? They're trying to point some things out that they think need to be changed, or that they just think they find amusing, or whatever, right? They're trying to make the world better with their fake news. The bad fake news that we have now is about sowing fear and anxiety, and it's propaganda, which is extremely different from The Onion's kind of fake news. That's very, very different from what news satire's mission is.
How do you pronounce the gentleman's name? Dahm? Dom.
Yeah.
One night, this is from your book, funny because it's true. One night, staring down a blank, empty space a few hours before the printer deadline and thinking in his goofball fifth grader voice, Dom did something that at the time was more or less tossed off, but was actually momentous. He wrote, "You are dumb," in a box and pasted it into the paper. Rich Dom had just invented The Onion's motto.
Yeah.
Explain that. You are dumb.
You are dumb. Yeah. So when I started this project, I knew about that was The Onion's motto. And I was like, well, that's not a very nice motto. You're telling people they're dumb. That's not very nice. But then after I talked to enough people about it and understood what they were talking about, it's about the stupidity of the human race. And to me, it's about, a system that rewards exploitation and greed and being a jerk and doesn't spend time on caring for and helping. That a society that has the focus that so much of our society does is a very dumb society. It's a very stupid way to have a culture. And The Onion's job is to point that out.
I just laughed when you said the stupidity of the human race, because we talked earlier about making small things big. I mean, stupid is something, you might hear a third grader yell to someone out the door, and then it's slapped against an entire race of humanity, the human race. And I just found myself imagining, what if we named the race just, this is the stupid race. There's almost something freeing about a stupid race coming over the horizon. You're on one shore, and here comes the stupid race, and they're coming, and you can almost say to yourself, well, things are going to get weird here. Do you know about these guys? No, who are they? Well, that's the stupid race, and they're coming, and they're going to live here for many, many centuries. You've worked your whole life. And now you want to live. Live. Josh Arnold, he helps you map your life. 40 years of experience guiding Minnesotans through retirement plans, investment ideas, helping them understand their IRA, their 401k, the tools they need to make tomorrow feel like freedom. That's what's waiting for you, folks. Josh Arnold, he wants to take you there. Call him for a 48-minute consultation free, just a conversation about what matters to you, your goals, your dreams, your peace of mind. That's it. 952-925-5608. 48 minutes free.
Investment services offered by Josh Arnold Investment Consultant, LLC, a security and investment advisor. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All investments involve risk. Tommy MISCHKE is a paid endorser.
Think about the last time you felt unstoppable. The wind in your face, the city, the trails, the world opening up under your wheels. That's what an e-bike from EcoFun Motorsports feels like. It's not just a bike. It's your shortcut to freedom, people. Your excuse to explore, your way to move faster, farther, smarter, easier. Freedom! They're having an e-bike sale at EcoFun Motorsports. Now's the time. Burnsville, Forest Lake. This is your moment. The late summer sun, the crisp autumn air. Imagine the trails you've never ridden, the streets you've never seen, the energy you didn't know you had because you never rode on an e-bike. Try it out at EcoFun Motorsports. Tell them MISCHKE said you get to try it out first. It isn't the future any longer. It's your best decision today. The idea of the trickster. Can you talk about the trickster?
The trickster archetype is an archetype that, as far as I can tell, is in pretty much like every culture and every period of time. It seems to be something inherent to the human species. It goes really, really deep. And it's the trickster that opens the door into a new place, right? So people tend to be dismissive. Well, it's just jokes. It's just funny. Like, it's not important. The trickster figure is actually, on a kind of a deep human level, kind of the person who brings insight. And I think that that's really important.
That idea, again, of the Onion serving society, that we're going to have some laughs here, we're going to have some fun, but it's funny because it's true. There are some truths being revealed here that are really disturbing, and you should look at that while you're laughing.
Yes, because the other thing that happens when you're laughing is that there's this little window where you're sort of open. A joke can point something out and change your mind about something very, very quickly. You know, an academic can drone on, all afternoon and not get nearly as much done as a really good one-liner.
Very true. The innate foolishness of human beings has been the basis of satire for thousands of years, but at its heart, satire is about how dumb people can be and all the ways they either don't notice or try to justify it. The Onion would go on to take ridiculing humanity, especially American humanity, and how it uses the media to both enact and enforce its stupidity to amazing heights. And it did rise to amazing heights. The last thing I want to ask you about is where the Onion is going now. So somewhere in its history, it got so big, it lost its way a little bit.
Yeah. The Onion started getting bought and sold by various corporate owners. They went through 2 or 3 of them, I think. And the various models that were, kind of online ad revenue generating models were just like falling into the toilet. They unfortunately ended up in a kind of quantity over quality situation for a while. They were also in a situation where they were expected to respond to like the day's news, the moment's news. And in the prior version of the Onion, they did not have to do that, which let them take longer to make stuff. So yeah, they were kind of caught in the same situation that many other media companies were.
What is happening now that is so hopeful?
About a year or so ago, Onion fans bought the Onion when it was going to be, dumped by, the private equity firm that owned them at that time, along with, a billion other companies. And their whole mission is to set the Onion free again, and let them be creative and expand and try new stuff and get them off of this, quantity over quality thing, which they'd been sort of stuck in for a good 10, 15 years. And so one of the first things they did, as you mentioned, was they brought back the print edition, which is now a monthly that you can subscribe to. And I cried when I got my first one.
I believe it.
I was so happy to see it again because, I think the Onion, the Onion had gone out of print in 2013. So it had been like 10, 12 years since the Onion had been in print. And I'm an old school. I believe the Onion works really well in print, where there's a beginning and middle and end kind of experience. I'm very, very interested to see what they do over the next few years, because I do feel like, I hope that maybe they're in a new renaissance of sorts.
The book is funny because it's true. How the Onion created modern American news satire. Christine Wentz is the author. It's a wonderful book. I hope you folks get a hold of it. Thank you for spending time with me.
Thanks for having me, Tommy. This was great.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Good luck going forward.
Thank you.
Well, that's about going to do it for this show, people. Another one comes and goes. What the next one will be about, nobody knows. I have no idea what the next show is going to be about. I just know more shows are coming. We're keeping it humming.